The throne room of Draken Prime fell completely silent as 14-year-old Jake Matthews stepped forward onto the black marble floor. His worn boots made soft sounds that echoed in the massive chamber. The human boy looked impossibly small beneath the vaulted ceiling that stretched up hundreds of feet above him. Massive alien dragons perched on crystalline ledges that jutted from the walls, their scales gleaming like molten metal in the orange light of the twin suns streaming through the tall windows. Some were deep crimson red, others midnight blue, and a few shimmered with colors Jake didn't even have names for. Jake's hands were sweating. He wiped them on his pants and tried to stand tall, the way Drath had taught him. His heart pounded so hard he was sure the dragons could hear it. "This is an insult," rumbled Vex, the eldest of the Dragon Council. The ancient dragon's voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. His silver scales rippled with disgust as he leaned forward from his perch, yellow eyes narrowing at the small human standing in the center of the judgment circle. Commander Drath chose a human as his heir? A child with no scales, no fire, no wings? Jake's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to shout back to defend himself, but his throat felt tight. 3 months ago, Drath had been his father, the only family he'd ever known after being orphaned during a pirate raid on the mining colony where he'd been born. Jake barely remembered his real parents. Just flashes of his mother's smile and his father's laugh before the explosion started. He'd been 7 years old, hiding in a storage closet when Drath found him. The massive dragon could have left him there, but instead, Drath had scooped him up gently in one enormous claw and carried him away to safety. For 7 years, Drath had raised Jake as his own son. Taught him to read the old dragon texts. Showed him how to navigate by the stars. Told him stories about Earth, the human homeworld that Jake had never seen. Drath had been patient, kind, and strong. Everything a father should be. Now the dragon who'd raised him was gone, killed in battle defending a civilian transport from raiders. And Jake stood alone before the council, before creatures who looked at him like he was some kind of joke. "The boy has no wings, no fire, no strength," hissed Crone, another council member. His dark green scales bristled with anger. "How can he lead the Storm Legion? Our warriors would never follow a human. He cannot even fly. He cannot breathe flame. What kind of commander cannot do these basic things?" Other dragons murmured their agreement. Jake felt heat rising in his cheeks. Not from fire breath, humans couldn't do that, but from embarrassment and anger. He knew he was different. He knew he was small and weak compared to them. But Drath had chosen him for a reason, hadn't he? "Commander Drath's will was clear," said Beth suddenly. She was younger than most of the council, her golden scales bright against the dark stone walls. Her voice cut through the muttering like a blade. "He named Jake Matthews as his heir. He wanted the boy to lead his legion." Beth's golden eyes met Jake's for just a brief moment. There was something in her gaze, not quite kindness but not cruelty either. Maybe curiosity. Jake had met her a few times when she'd visited Drath. She'd always been polite to him, though never warm. "But if the council doubts," Beth continued, turning back to face Vex and the others, "then let the boy prove himself. Give him a chance to show his worth." Jake's heart sank. He knew what was coming. Vex's laugh was like grinding stone, harsh and cold. "Yes. An excellent idea, Beth." The old dragon's smile was cruel. "Let him face the trial of the Shadow Beast. That will settle this matter once and for all." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even some of the younger dragons shifted nervously on their perches. Jake had heard stories about the Shadow Beast. Everyone had. It lived in the deep chasm beneath the flame spires, a creature so ancient and deadly that even the bravest dragon warriors feared it. 3,000 years, Vex continued, his voice dripping with false concern. 3,000 years and no one has survived the trial. Not dragons, not Krolix warriors, not even battle machines. If the boy is truly worthy of leading the Storm Legion, he will live. If not... The dragon's smile widened, showing rows of blade-like teeth that could tear through steel. "Then the matter is settled, and we can choose a proper heir for Commander Drath's position." Jake's heart hammered in his chest like it was trying to break free. His mouth was dry. The Shadow Beast. They were sending him to face the Shadow Beast. He'd be killed for sure. Everyone knew the stories. No one survived. But what choice did he have? If he refused, they'd strip away Drath's legacy. They'd say his father had been foolish for choosing a human. Jake couldn't let that happen. He owed Drath everything. He lifted his chin and met Vex's cruel yellow eyes. His voice shook, but he forced the words out anyway. "I accept." The deep chasm yawned before Jake like a wound in the planet itself. He stood at the edge, looking down into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light. Steam rose from somewhere far below, twisting and curling like ghostly fingers reaching up toward him. The air tasted bitter, like sulfur mixed with something else he couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe. The place smelled like fear. Beth landed beside him with a heavy thud that shook the ground. Her golden wings folded against her sides as she turned to look at the boy. Up close she was enormous. Her head alone was bigger than Jake's entire body. But her eyes weren't cruel like Vex. They were sad. The shadow beast has killed every warrior sent against it, Beth said quietly. Her voice was gentler now, away from the council chamber. Dragons with centuries of battle experience. Krolyk's warriors who could tear through steel with their bare claws. We even sent a Titan battle mech once 20 years ago. A war machine 3 stories tall with enough firepower to level a city. She paused, her golden eyes distant as she remembered. It lasted 47 seconds. Jake swallowed hard. His hands were shaking, so he shoved them in his pockets to hide it. Your father believed humans had something we dragons lack, Beth continued. She looked down at Jake, searching his face. I hope he was right. I truly do. What am I supposed to do? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He couldn't stop staring into the darkness below. How do I fight it? No one knows, Beth admitted. All who learned the answer died with it. Their bodies were never recovered. Some were simply gone. Others. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Beth lowered her head until she was almost eye level with Jake. Do not try to fight it with strength, Jake. You will lose. The shadow beast is older than our civilization. It was here before we dragons built our first city. If you try to match its power, you will die like all the others. Then what do I do? Jake felt panic rising in his chest. His heart was racing again, and his palms were sweating despite the cold wind that whipped around them at the chasm's edge. Beth was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. But Drath chose you for a reason. He was the wisest dragon I ever knew. Trust yourself, Jake. Trust what he taught you. With that, she spread her wings and launched herself into the air, leaving Jake alone at the edge of the abyss. Jake looked back once. On the cliffs surrounding the chasm, he could see the Dragon Council gathering to watch. They were distant silhouettes against the orange sky, their forms dark and still. Waiting. Expecting him to die. Some probably hoping for it. He turned back to the chasm and started down. Ancient stairs had been carved into the rock wall, spiraling down into the depths. They were old, worn smooth by countless feet over thousands of years. Some steps were cracked. Others had chunks missing. Jake had to move carefully, pressing his back against the stone wall. There were no railings, nothing to catch him if he slipped. Below was only darkness and the faint sound of dripping water. As Jake descended, he tried to remember everything Drath had taught him. His father had told him stories about earth animals. About lions and bears and wolves. Dangerous creatures, yes, but not evil. Just animals trying to survive. Drath had said that was important to understand. The difference between dangerous and evil. Most beings aren't monsters, Jake, Drath had told him once while they sat watching the sunset from their home in the mountains. They're just scared. Hungry. Protecting their territory. If you understand that, you can survive things that others cannot. Jake hadn't understood what his father meant at the time. Now, walking down into darkness to face certain death, he wondered if this was what Drath had been preparing him for. The temperature dropped as he went deeper. Soon Jake could see his breath forming white clouds in the air. His thin jacket wasn't enough to keep out the cold and he started shivering. The walls of the chasm were covered in frost now, glittering in the dim light that filtered down from above. The cavern at the bottom was massive. Jake's footsteps echoed as he reached the final step and walked out onto the smooth stone floor. The space stretched away into shadows in every direction. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped with a steady rhythm. The sound was lonely and hollow. Jake stood in the center of the cavern, his breath coming in visible puffs. He waited. His legs felt weak and he fought the urge to sit down. To give up. Then he heard it. A sound like reality itself tearing apart. A presence that made every instinct in his body scream at him to run, to climb back up those stairs as fast as he could and never stop running. The shadow beast emerged from the darkness. It was massive. Bigger than any dragon Jake had ever seen. Its form constantly shifted between solid and smoke, never quite one or the other. Sometimes Jake could see through it. Other times it looked as real as stone. Eyes like dying stars opened across its body, not just 2 but dozens of them, all fixing on the small human boy standing in the center of its domain. A wave of pure terror crashed over Jake. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something primal that reached into his brain and told him he was prey. His legs nearly buckled. His vision swam. He wanted to scream but couldn't find his voice. The shadow beast moved closer, flowing across the ground like oil, its massive form towering above him. But then Jake saw something the dragons hadn't seen. Something that changed everything. The shadow beast lunged forward with a roar that shook the entire cavern. Rocks fell from the ceiling, crashing around Jake. The creature's massive form surged toward him like a tsunami of darkness and smoke, its dozens of eyes blazing with ancient fury. Jake's body locked up. Every muscle screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. This was it. He was going to die. But then the shadow beast stopped. It froze just inches from Jake, close enough that he could feel the cold radiating from its form. The creature tilted what might have been its head, confusion flickering across those strange, star-like eyes. The human wasn't running. Wasn't screaming. Wasn't trying to fight or throw some weapon at it. The boy was just standing there, shaking like a leaf but standing. Jake's mind raced. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. But something in his brain clicked, pushing past the terror. This creature had just stopped. It could have killed him instantly, but it stopped. What? Easy, Jake whispered, his voice shaking so badly he could barely get the words out. Easy there, boy. The words felt strange in his mouth, spoken to this massive nightmare creature. But they were the same words his mother had used years ago, back before everything went wrong. A memory surfaced through Jake's fear, clear and bright like sunlight breaking through clouds. He'd been 6 years old, living on Earth in a small town before his parents moved to the colony. His mom worked at an animal shelter. Jake remembered the day they'd found the dog in an alley behind the grocery store. It was a big dog, some kind of mixed breed with matted fur and ribs showing through its skin. When people got close, it would snarl and snap, foam dripping from its jaws. That dog's dangerous, the grocery store owner had said. Put it down before it hurts someone. But Jake's mom had seen something different. She'd crouched down, keeping her distance, and just talked to the dog. Soft words. Gentle tones. She went back every day for 3 weeks, bringing food, never pushing, never forcing. Just being present. Jake remembered the day the dog finally let her touch it. The way it had flinched at first, then slowly relaxed. The way its tail had wagged just a little, like it had forgotten how. They'd named him Buddy. He'd lived with them for 2 years before the move to the colony, the gentlest dog Jake had ever known. The shadow beast wasn't a monster, Jake realized with sudden clarity. It was like that dog. Terrified. Suffering. Lashing out because it didn't know anything else. Jake forced his feet to move, taking one small step forward. Then another. His whole body was shaking, but he kept moving. That's when he saw them. The chains. They were barely visible, like strands of frozen light woven through the shadow beast's shifting form. They pulsed with a sickly pale glow, embedded deep in whatever passed for the creature's body. Some wrapped around areas that might have been limbs. Others cut straight through its center. They looked ancient, covered in strange symbols that hurt Jake's eyes when he tried to focus on them. The chains weren't just holding the creature here. They were causing it pain. Jake could see the way the shadow beast's form rippled and shuddered around them, the way its many eyes squeezed shut whenever it moved too quickly. They hurt you, Jake said softly, taking another step closer. His fear was still there, like ice in his stomach, but something else was stronger now. Anger. Sadness. These dragons had done this. They'd chained this creature here, trapped it in the darkness for thousands of years, and then sent warriors to fight it like it was some kind of monster. They trapped you down here, Jake continued, his voice getting steadier. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. The shadow beast's eyes widened. All of them all at once. The creature went completely still, its shifting form solidifying for just a moment. In 3,000 years, through countless battles, through endless loneliness and rage, no one had ever apologized to it. No one had ever said they were sorry. Above, on the cliffs surrounding the chasm, the Dragon Council watched in stunned silence. Vex's jaw hung open. Crone had actually stood up on his perch, his wings spread in shock. Even Beth, who had hoped Jake might survive, couldn't believe what she was seeing. Jake raised his hand slowly. His arm felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The shadow beast could kill him so easily, could tear him apart in an instant. But Jake kept his hand steady, reaching toward the massive creature. It's okay, he whispered. I'm not going to hurt you. His fingers made contact with the shadow beast's form. It felt cold, like touching fog, but also somehow solid. The creature flinched violently, pulling back. Jake's heart jumped, but he didn't pull his hand away. It's okay, he said again. It's okay. Slowly, carefully, the shadow beast moved back toward him. Jake's hand rested against its form, and he began to move it gently, the way he used to pet Buddy. Long, slow strokes. Calm. Peaceful. For the first time in millennia, the shadow beast felt something other than rage and pain and endless, crushing loneliness. It felt warmth. Care. Something it had forgotten the name for but recognized deep in whatever served as its heart. It felt kindness. The creature's dozens of eyes began to close, one by one. Its massive form relaxed, the constant shifting and writhing slowing down. It leaned into Jake's touch, this tiny human who had done what thousands of warriors could not. "I'm going to help you," Jake promised, looking at those chains of light that caused so much pain. His father's multi-tool was in his pocket. He had no idea if it would work, but he had to try. "Just, don't eat me, okay?" Jake added, and despite everything, despite the fear and the danger and the impossibility of it all, he smiled just a little. Something changed between them after that night. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was real. They started spending more time together, not just at the community center but everywhere. Coffee shops became their planning headquarters. Park benches turned into brainstorming spots. Even grocery store aisles became places where they'd bump into each other and end up talking for an hour. The boy found himself looking forward to seeing her. Not because of the project or the program, but just because she had this way of making ordinary moments feel special. When they walked through the neighborhood together, she'd point out things he'd never noticed before. A mural hidden behind a dumpster. An old couple who held hands every evening at sunset. A corner store owner who always gave free candy to kids on Fridays. She saw beauty in places he'd only seen struggle. And slowly he started seeing it too. One afternoon they were sitting on the steps outside the center watching kids play basketball. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She had her notebook out, scribbling ideas for their next workshop. He was supposed to be helping, but instead he was watching her. The way she bit her lip when she concentrated. The way her eyes lit up when she had a good idea. She looked up and caught him staring. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she smiled, that genuine smile that reached her eyes, and his heart did something weird in his chest. Something he wasn't used to feeling. He cleared his throat and looked away, suddenly interested in the basketball game. But she didn't let it go that easily. She nudged him with her shoulder, gentle but playful. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, but his voice came out rougher than he intended. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About you," he thought. "About how you make me want to be better. About how I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time. Maybe ever." But he couldn't say that. Not yet. So instead he said, "About how different things are now. Good different." She smiled again, and this time she didn't look away either. They sat there in that comfortable silence, shoulders touching, watching the world move around them. It felt natural. It felt right. The workshops kept growing. More kids showed up each week. Parents started volunteering. Local businesses began donating supplies. What started as a small idea was becoming something real, something that mattered. And through it all, they worked side by side, their partnership becoming stronger with each passing day. But it wasn't just about the work anymore. They started texting each other late at night, just random thoughts or funny things they'd seen. She'd send him pictures of sunrises from her morning runs. He'd share songs that reminded him of their conversations. Small things that meant everything. One evening, after a particularly successful workshop, they decided to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just pizza at a small place down the street. They sat in a corner booth, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, their fears. She told him about the pressure she felt to always be perfect, to never let anyone down. He told her about the weight of his past, the constant fear that he'd mess everything up. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her touch was warm, reassuring. "You're not your past," she said softly. "You're what you choose to do right now, today. And right now you're doing something amazing." He looked down at their hands, fingers intertwined. Something in his chest loosened, a knot he didn't even know was there. "I couldn't do it without you," he admitted. "Yes, you could," she said. "But I'm glad you don't have to." They stayed there until the restaurant closed, talking and laughing like they'd known each other forever. When they finally left, he walked her home, taking the long route because neither of them wanted the night to end. At her door, they stood there awkwardly for a moment, both knowing something had shifted but neither quite ready to name it. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and soft. "See you tomorrow," she whispered, then disappeared inside before he could respond. He walked home with a stupid grin on his face, touching the spot where her lips had been. The streets didn't seem so dark anymore. The neighborhood didn't feel so heavy. For the first time in years he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. He felt hope. And maybe, just maybe, he felt love starting to bloom. The ground trembled as they emerged from the darkness. Every eye in the valley turned toward the mouth of the deep chasm. For centuries that place had been forbidden territory, a graveyard where hope went to die. No one who entered ever came back. But today was different. Today someone did come back. The young warrior appeared first, his armor scratched and dusty but his head held high. And beside him, moving like liquid midnight, was the creature that had haunted their nightmares for 3,000 years. The shadow beast. Except it wasn't a beast anymore. Its movements were fluid and controlled, not wild and chaotic. Its massive form glided through the air with an elegance that took everyone's breath away. And its eyes, those terrifying red eyes that had struck fear into generations of warriors, were now calm and clear like pools of still water under moonlight. The warrior's hand rested gently on the creature's neck. They moved as one, completely in sync, as if they'd been together for years instead of hours. He'd named it Shadow, and somehow that simple name felt right. It captured both what the creature had been and what it had become. The Dragon Council stood frozen on their platform. These were the mightiest warriors in the realm, dragons who had seen countless battles and faced impossible odds. But none of them had ever witnessed anything like this. The oldest among them, Commander Vex, stepped forward. His scales, once bright crimson, had faded to a dusky red with age. His wings trembled slightly as he approached. When he spoke, his voice cracked with emotion he couldn't hide. 3,000 years, he whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. 3,000 years we've fought this creature. We've sent our best warriors. We've tried every weapon, every strategy, every spell we knew. He paused, his ancient eyes glistening. And none of us, not a single one of us, thought to show it mercy. The words hung in the air like a confession. Around the valley, warriors began to murmur among themselves. Some looked ashamed. Others looked confused. A few looked angry, as if this revelation challenged everything they believed about strength and power. The young warrior dismounted slowly, his boots touching the ground with a soft thud. Shadow lowered its massive head, and he stroked it gently, the way you'd comfort an old friend. The contrast was striking. This creature that had terrorized their world for so long was now as docile as a pet, responding to kindness instead of violence. It was never evil, the warrior said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. It was in pain. Trapped in darkness for thousands of years, with nothing but rage and loneliness to keep it company. It attacked because it knew nothing else. Because we gave it no other choice. Another council member, a silver dragon named Kira, flew down to get a closer look. She'd lost her brother to the shadow beast decades ago. Everyone expected her to be furious, to demand revenge. Instead, she approached slowly, cautiously, until she was close enough to touch Shadow's scales. The creature watched her with those clear eyes, waiting. When she reached out her claw, Shadow didn't flinch or growl. It simply stood there, accepting her touch. A single tear rolled down Kira's scaled cheek. "My brother died fighting you," she said softly. "I've hated you for so long. But you were just scared, weren't you? Just like he was. Just like all of us." The warrior nodded. "Fear makes monsters of us all. I learned that down there in the darkness. Shadow taught me that the hardest battles aren't fought with swords or fire. They're fought with understanding. With compassion." Commander Vex stepped closer, his massive form towering over the young warrior. But there was no anger in his expression. Only wonder and something that looked like respect. "You did what none of us could do," he said. "You saw past the monster to the broken soul underneath. You succeeded where we all failed." He turned to address the gathered crowd, his voice growing stronger. "For 3,000 years, we've defined strength as the ability to destroy our enemies. But this warrior has shown us a different kind of strength. The strength to choose mercy over vengeance. Understanding over fear. Connection over conquest." The crowd erupted in whispers and murmurs. Some warriors nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical, their old beliefs hard to shake. Change never comes easy, especially when it challenges everything you've built your life around. Shadow lifted its great head and let out a sound that wasn't quite a roar. It was something softer, almost musical. A sound of peace. Around the valley, other dragons responded, their calls mixing with Shadow's in a harmony that had never existed before. The warrior looked up at his bonded companion and smiled. Together, they descended into the deepest darkness and emerged with light. They'd faced fear and found friendship. They'd proven that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight. Sometimes it's to extend your hand to someone everyone else has given up on. Commander Vex placed his massive claw on the warrior's shoulder. The council has a decision to make, he announced. But first, I think we all need to learn from what happened here today. Real strength isn't about who can hit the hardest. It's about who has the courage to try something different when everyone else says it's impossible.